And then I had the order wrong. Next is Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Communities of color, indigenous communities, low-income communities, and immigrant communities are more likely to be located in climate risk-prone areas and areas with degraded infrastructure, making them even more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It's one of the many reasons I was proud to support the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law last Congress, which are making critical investments to combat the climate crisis. And notably, these laws direct resources towards many of the underserved and frontline communities that I just referenced, which far too often bear the brunt of the crisis and other natural disasters. First question is for Dr. Carney. Can you talk about how the climate crisis disproportionately impacts these already marginalized communities and the importance of equity in our financial response and investments?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Yes, it is an unfortunate reality that climate change has these impacts in part through the direct areas in which many disadvantaged communities live, proximity, for example, to our coasts. And of course, this committee will know that 40% of Americans are living within 1/8 of a mile of coasts, and coasts which potentially are subject to on some estimates, $500 billion of property damage over the balance of this century. Secondly, to the extent to which more extreme weather conditions leads to greater volatility in food prices, energy costs, that will also be a direct impact to these disadvantaged groups. And then thirdly, one of the issues that we're all going to be facing around the world, certainly in America as well, businesses and families, is ability to get insurance cover as these impacts become more prominent, the ability to afford it if it is available, and of course, so for families, and I'll finish with this, that are already vulnerable to not have the protection of the insurance industry can provide because of just the risk, the greater risks that have become central scenarios, if you will, that adds to the vulnerability.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Carney. Appreciate you raising the issue of insurance coverage. We're working with the White House on an initiative in that regard, so look forward to following up with you. But on the same broad theme, for far too long, it's these disadvantaged communities that I'm talking about that have also been underserved or face barriers when it comes to accessing financial services. Unfortunately, as Dr. Litterman wrote in his testimony, certain sectors of our economy are more susceptible to the subsystemic risks of climate change. This includes community and regional financial institutions, given that they typically serve geographically concentrated areas and can suffer potentially significant losses due to natural disasters and extreme weather events. So given that these institutions serve a vital function in providing financial access to low-income individuals and marginalized communities, the risk is even more concerning. Dr. Litterman, can you discuss the risk of these climate-fueled subsystemic shocks to local and regional economies and describe how they could disproportionately impact these communities?
Sure. Well, wealthy communities will be able to build their infrastructure, harden their infrastructure, and be prepared. And I live in California, and we see smoke more often now. Well, if I put a HEPA filter in and I can filter my air, I'm better off. But not everyone can afford that. People who can't afford to address some of these risks that are coming, whether it's drought, smoke, heat waves, and so on, if they can't air condition their homes, they're going to be suffering. And we see that around the world. When exposed people are impacted by these hazards, it's the poor that suffer the most. So it's absolutely just one more example of where we have inequity and we're not paying attention to it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.